talking about a dangerous voyage on the sea, Mediterranean Sea. It's in a bad time of the year. We're in verse number 28. Paul
Do you have this turned on?
Paul is becoming the captain of the ship because of his direct communication with God. And they're trying to make it to shore, a safe shore. The ship is just about wrecked. And I'm going to do something backwards today. We're going to read verse number 28. And we're going to read the Amplified Bible first. Then we're going to go back and look at it in Greek. So they took soundings and found 20 fathoms. A little further on, they sounded again and found 15 fathoms. Now, in other words, it's getting shallow. Now, this might be 1 fathom equals about 6 feet. Some people say it's from one fingertip to the other, like this, which is about 6 feet. From one, mine is 6'2", actually. And so it's about 6 foot, about 120 feet the first sounding. And by the way, the word sounding there means a lead, sharp lead object. The second sounding was 15 fathoms, or about 90 feet. Went from 120 feet to 90 feet now. Now they're getting scared. And they kept on wishing for daybreak. They were praying for daybreak, fearing that it might fall off our course onto the rocks. They dropped 4 anchors from the front of the boat and kept wishing for daybreak. They kept praying for daybreak. And as the sailors were trying to escape secretly from the ship, we get our word nautical from that word sailors there, our English word. Some people were trying to escape from the ship, and they were lowering down a small boat into the sea, pretending that they were going to lay out anchors from the bow. Paul said to the centurion and to the soldiers, "Unless these men remain in the ship, you cannot be saved." Now they're listening. Then the soldiers cut away the ropes that held the small boat and let it fall and drift away. And while they waited until it should become day, Paul entreated them all to take some food, saying, "This is 14th day that we have been continually in suspense and on the alert without a regular meal, without food." They hadn't taken a regular meal for 14 days, 2 weeks. They probably had a little snack now and then or something, threw something in their mouth to keep on going, but that was all. They haven't eaten nothing. So I urge you to take some food for your safety. You're going to have strength. It will give you strength, for not a hair is to perish from the head of any one of you. And having said these words, he took bread, and now we have a little prayer meeting. And giving thanks to God before them all, he broke it and began to eat. Now, the word bread many times means just any kind of food. You could be breaking up jerky or raisin cakes or whatever. And they all became more cheerful and were encouraged, and they took some food themselves. And all told, there were 276 souls of us in the ship. 276 men on the ship in all. That's a large group of people. And after they had eaten sufficiently, they had stuffed themselves. They were probably very hungry. They proceeded to lighten the ship, throwing out all the wheat into the sea. Now the fish were probably having a good time here. Now when it was day, and they saw the land, they did not recognize it. But they noticed a bay with a beach on it, which they, having taken counsel, they purposed to run the ship ashore if they could possibly do that. They were going to run the ship right into the sandy shore. And verse number 40 now. So they cut the cables, or the ropes, and severed their anchors, and let them into the sea. At the same time, unlashing the ropes that held the rudders. Now the rudders were a type of paddle. And they had the rudders, some of these ships had 4 rudders on them, tied together. And these rudders were tied so they would not go off course or whatever, so they could hold their course. And they hoisted the foresail to the wind, and they headed for the beach. They're going to crash the ship on the beach. But striking a cross current, now bad news. A place open to 2 seas, they ran the ship aground. Now they're out in the sandbar now. And the prow stuck fast and remained immovable. And the stern began to break up under the violent force of the waves. And it was the counsel of the soldiers to kill all the prisoners. Because a Roman soldier, if he lost a prisoner, it was his life and he could be crucified. Lest any of them should swim to the land and escape. But the centurion, wishing to save Paul, prevented their carrying out their purpose. And he commanded those who could swim to throw themselves overboard first and make for the shore. And the rest on heavy boards or pieces of the vessel. And so it was that they all escaped safely to land. Now let's go back and look at some of these beautiful words in these verses. I hope you didn't mind what's going backwards that time.
Oh, it was good doing that.
Kai balisantes, euron, orgias, ekosi, broxu, de, dias thesantes, Kai Pauline, Velosantes, Euron, Orgias, Decapente. And having sounded. Now this word sounded here, this means to throw a leaded or a heavy weight. So they threw a heavy weight into the ground. Like Mark Twain said, Mark Twain, he said, Mark Twain, 2 fathoms. That's what that meant. Mark Twain, 2 fathoms. And they found fathoms 20, about 120 feet. And a little bit further, having moved, also again, they sounded. They threw this lead weight on a cord into the ground. And they found 15 fathoms. Decapente, 10 and 5. Phobion menoi, te, me, pu, kata, throxes, topus, ek pesomen, ek, 3 menes, ripsantes, agiros, tesaros, e konto, hemeron, geneste. And they were both fearing that they might fall against rough places, rocky places. And we might fall off the edge. And out of the stern, having thrown the anchors. Out of the front end of the boat, they threw all the anchors. They threw out all 4 anchors. And they kept on praying. And kept on begging for daylight to become. Third person plural imperfect indicative middle voice. Every man was praying that daylight would come. These boys had had a big prayer meeting right here. Tone de neaton, zeto on tone, fegain, ek tu ployo, kai kalasan tone, tain scaphain, ace tain thalassane, pro facin, hos ek pro race, ag gyros, melonton ek tanane. Now the sailors. Now here's where we get the word nauton. The word nauton, that's where we get nautical. Seeking to flee out of the ship. And then they lowered down this skiff, this scaphain, where our word skiff comes right out. This is a small boat. This is a rowboat or a lifeboat, so to speak, unto the sea. Under the pretense, prophace, as out of the prow anchors, they're intending to cast out. They're what we call going AWOL. Now Paul, he catches on to this real fast. Apen ho Paulos to ek ka to tarke kai tois strate ontes yon me hutoi me nusen anto ployo hemes sostene u deneste. And to Paul he said to the centurion and to the soldiers. The centurion there is hekton tarke, and the word soldiers is stratu ontes. Now that's, we get our word strategy out of it. Soldiers are strategists. They're like generals, okay? Figuring out the strategies. Unless these ones, they may remain. Now this word here, third person plural first air, is subjunctive active. That is, they may or they may not. And that comes from minnow. Subjunctive mode is the mode of doubtful affirmation. So Paul is saying to them, if these guys don't do this, this is a third class conditional or a second class conditional, in the boat, ye to be saved, not disabled. It's not, the whole crew has to be saved together. So if you don't stop these men, it's not possible for us to be saved. Second person plural, present, indicative, passive, from dynamite. Verse number 32. Tote, ape, kopson, hoe, strate toi, tai, that is, ta, ske, one, tes, scaphes, kai, eason, altain, ek, pesen. Then they cut away all the soldiers cut away the ropes. They chopped them up with their swords or axes. All the ropes of the boat, and they let the skiffs fall and they lost it. In other words, you know, there have been shipwrecks in times past, like the unsinkable Titanic. They didn't have enough lifeboats on there for the people, nor life jackets, because it was supposed to be unsinkable. They didn't think they needed it. But this boat here had at least one lifeboat, one rowboat, one small skiff on it, so some people could be saved, and so that's what they wanted to do. Sometimes you can do a whole lot better out there with a little old boat floating like a cork than in a ship. (33) Akri de hu hemera emelen geneste parakale ho paulos apontes metalabain trophes legon tessa resa kai decate. Simeon, Hemeron, Pros Docontes, Ositoi, Dia Telete, Methe, Pros La Benoi. He said until today it was about Paul, when it became day or about to become day, Paul kept on begging all of the people, everyone, to partake of food, saying, 14th day today, anxiously waiting, living in the fear of our lives, and without food you continued nothing having taken. Now, some of the commentators here believe that they had snacks on the way, they had little batches of food, but they could have gone 14 days without eating. But I doubt if they could have gone 14 days without eating and drinking. And what would they be drinking, by the way?
Seawater.
What would they be drinking?
Wine.
Wine. Now, wine has energy in it, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So if they couldn't have gone without drinking, if they indeed did go without eating that long, which many commentators said they probably didn't have a regular meal for 14 days. But they still would have been drinking wine, and the wine would have given them strength. But they needed strength now, and Paul's telling them, you're going to need all the strength you got. He said, you haven't been taking, you've been waiting anxiously, pros dokao. It is nominative, plural, masculine, present participle, active voice. He said, you've been waiting in fear all of this time. You know that nervousness burns up energy, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. Nervousness burns up energy. When you're under great stress, it really stresses out your body. Some people, if they've been under tremendous stress, they'll just lose weight. Just lose weight. Mm-hmm. Just waste away. And these people were probably on a real good diet. You didn't have to worry back at that time. I mean, in America today, everybody's fat or nearly fat, because we got plenty of food to eat. But back in those days, they were slim and trim because they did a lot of physical labor. Dia parakalo, verse number 34, Himas, meta labain, trophes tuto, gar, pros, tes, hameteros, soterios, hiparche, udanes, gar, amen, trix, apotes kopheles, apolete. He said, I beg you, I beseech you, to receive, to partake of food, trophes, something nutritious, trophes. For this is very important for your salvation, for your life, is what I said. Most of the word soterios, that means salvation, it's spiritual, but this here is talking about life. Saving your life. It is very important to save your life, to eat food. It keeps on being. Third person singular present indicative active from hypoarche. If you want to exist any longer, you better eat something. For no one of ye a hair from the kephales, from the head of you, shall perish. It shall perish for itself. There might have been people pulling their hair out, but not one hair of their head would perish, it says. Apos de tauta, kai labon, arton, euchariste, to theo, enopion, ponton, kai klasos, exato, es theane. And having said these things, and having taken bread, now this word here is artos. Okay? Artos means bread. The other word, trophes, that means any kind of food. Anything. But now he takes a loaf of bread, like Jesus did. And he takes the bread and he gives thanks to God down in the presence of all of them. And having broke it, he began to eat. And having broken it, he began to eat. And this encourages everybody now. Now here we got the spiritual leader of the voyage, and we got the what we might call the surrogate captain. Verse number 36. You themoi, de genomenoi, pantes kai, autoi, tros selabonton trophes. And in good humor and in spirits, all of this good humor and spirits has began. Nominative plural masculine, present participle mid. Each person, every person, spirit was lifted up. They got happy all of a sudden. They're going to eat something now. We're going to make it. When you think you're going to survive, it is a great joy, isn't it? You know, wars have been fought. And you can go on YouTube and different places and you can look at the beaches of Normandy and things just scattered with human bodies. And the men that are standing up there that have made it. They don't know how they made it so many times because the person right next to them just exploded with a shell hitting them. Evaporated sometimes. Then you get up there and you get past all of this and you can sit down and you might get hungry. I can guarantee you almost everybody on the shore wasn't looking for a Hershey bar. They were looking to stay alive. But now these people here, they're having become in good humor, euthymoi, having become in good spirits. Also, they took food. See the word food there? Trophes. They took trophes. They took all kinds of different kinds of food. Maybe raisin cakes, maybe bread, fish, dried fish, whatever they did. They started eating different kinds of food. Verse number 37 now. Ametha de he pase. Psyche ento ploion diakuse eb do me conta ex. And there was in here among them individual souls, individuals of life, souls. There we have the word psyche. In the boat, 276 people. 276 people were happy for a few moments again. They had been under great terror and pressure and begging God to send daylight. Even when you're out in the dark. I've done this. I've been in this situation. Right out here, I felt like I was shipwrecked. The night that I was out there by the hot well and a flash flood hit, I got out there in the car and the lights went out and nothing was there. And I got out and the water was this deep and running mud. You could hear boulders rolling. All types of debris coming down. And I mean it was a pitch black night because all of a sudden it was totally blackness. The lights were out down in this part of the valley, down in that part of the valley. There was nothing up here. At that time there were no houses or anything. But you couldn't see a light any place. All you could see was darkness. That was it. Just darkness. And I got out there feeling my way along, and then the lightning struck bolt. The lightning bolt hit right in front of me and blinded me temporarily. One eye stayed, the retina stayed shut for 2 or 3 days. The other one came back in a little while. I don't know what I'd done if I couldn't see at all. I got out to the road, walked 7 miles, feeling the ground. In darkness. Total darkness because couldn't see at all. Till I finally got out there and I saw these lights coming. Boy, I was happy. Light! And having been satisfied, chorestantes, and having been satisfied, filled up of all kinds of food, they lightened the boat, casting out the wheat, the ceton, unto the sea. Now this was a wheat ship, carrying wheat food to Rome. Now their lives are more important than the cargo. They had thrown out the tackle, all the furniture of the ship before. Now they're throwing out all of the cargo. Verse number 39. Hote de hemera, egeneto tangain uk, epi inos kon, kopon, de tina, katenusen, ekonta, aigileon, ace, hon, ebulonton, ebulonto that is, a dinato, ex use, to ployon. And when day finally began for itself, or became for itself, they couldn't recognize the land not they could recognize. From the word epigenosko there, they couldn't, they kept on not recognizing the land. And the word kolpon there, it means a bosom, a bay, a bosom, someplace where you can go and be safety. A child wants to be safe in the bosom of his mother or father. But then a certain, they kept on noticing a shoreline, which they kept on wishing to go there. That word ebulon tone, it comes from bulamai, or bulio, third person plural imperfect indicative middle. Middle voice. Each man here kept on wanting to go to that sandy shore, to that haven, to that little bay. I remember when Marilyn we used to go out of Port San Luis over there. Actually, we didn't go out of Port San Luis for about 2 years or 2.5 years. We just stayed in the bay. Marilyn didn't want to go out on those wide open waters, did you? No. I told her, I said, the fish are out there, their houses, they live out there. And she said, this is water, fish here. This is water, they're down here. Well, we caught 1 or 2 little fish, didn't we? But finally one day, I pointed that boat out. And I opened the throttle up, and once we hit out of the bay, she said, where are we going, Hawaii? Like that. I said, we're going fishing. And she was afraid. She kept on wishing that we would go back into the bay. But she got out there and she hooked those big fish. Remember that, Marilyn? And then you were hooked, weren't you? That was the end of your fear. You had to fish on the end of the line. And remember, one of the first fish you caught was a great big lingcod. We know because of the way it fought. But something happened, didn't it? The lingcod run into rocks. They're a rock fish, and they'll go in there and they'll run into little rock caves and stuff down there. You can't get them out of there. And Marilyn was sitting there and she was pulling on that line, and the line was bent over like that, and she was going like this, and she had a line counter on there. And the line counter was not moving. But she was cranking and cranking and cranking and cranking and cranking. And so I said, well, I pulled the boat one way and I pulled the boat the other. I was trying to pull the fish out. And finally I said, let me have the reel and I'll see what we're going to have to do. We may have to cut the line. She said, no. I've got that fish almost up here. I said, Marilyn, it's not going anyplace. It's down there. That fish is almost up here. I know it had to be here. And I said, no, it's not here. It's down there. It's in the rocks. Finally, I pulled on that line, and it broke. And she looked at me with a very severe, stern look, and she said, don't ever touch my pole again. I had that fish in here. And we didn't laugh about it then, did we, Marilyn? But later on, I took Mike Cope out there. And Mike Cope did exactly the same thing. He hooked a big lingcod, and I moved the boat one way, and I moved the boat the other way, and he said, we may have to, I said, we may have to cut the line. He said, what? Cut my line? My fish? No! Like that. Well, then Marilyn laughed, didn't you, Marilyn?
Yeah.
Because it reminded you of old time. They kept on wishing. Every one of them kept on wishing that they could drive, that they were able to drive the ship upon the sands. And in that safe harbor, that copon, that bosom of safety. Verse number 40 now. Kai tos ag gyros, perilontes, ion, eis tein thalason, ama, anaites tos, zouk, terios, ton, pe de leon, kai, eparcarontes, ton, Arturo Manoa, te, nuse, kata ekon, eis ton, agilon. And the anchors. Now these anchors may have been metal, but probably they were big stones with a hole in them and ropes tied around them. That's what they had for anchors back then. And their anchors, all of the anchors, they cast off. Having cast around is what it says here. Peri letes. It comes from peri and iro. In other words, they took them and threw them in the air. Got away from them. And they kept on leaving them in the sea. And at the same time, this Hama now, having loosened the fastenings of the rudders. In other words, the rudders were tied together, and they say there are at least 4 rudders on these ships because it's a pretty large ship, so it has to have a paddle rudder, like a paddle, except there's 4 of them down there. And they loosened them up, and having raised the foresail into the breeze, into the wind, they kept on holding. They kept on holding onto the ship at an angle to the shore. The Aegilion, the lip of the sea. Verse number 41 now. Peri pesantes, de eis topon, diathalasen, epikelon, tain, naun, kai, he, man, prora, eresasa, emanan, asalitos, heyday, tronema, eluta, hippo, tes, bios, ton, kamaton. And having come unto the place between 2 seas. Now, in other words, these 2 seas, they are running together. There's currents in both seas. Now, the current is going to shift them. Not the sail is going to drive them, but the current's going to drive them now. And they were being driven. The vessel and the prow, having run around, having turned around. Nominative singular feminine, first aorist participle active. It turned around abruptly. First aorist, punctiliar action. And it remained immovable. They couldn't lutos. They couldn't move it. And the stern, it kept on being broken to pieces by the force of the waves. Now look at the word force. This bios there. That means the ocean had life in it. It had force. It had power. The ocean, the waves had power. Remember sometimes, Marilyn, we used to go out there in the ocean, we'd take our boat, and all of a sudden we'd be sitting out there, and all of a sudden we'd be gone 200 or 300 yards. The current was carrying us. moving on. Sometimes we'll be set there, but now and then we'd get into a current. Verse number 42. Ton de stratioton boule egeneto hina tus des mates apokatenusen me tis ek kalobesias dia fide. And the soldiers, remember what the word strap to tone means? Our word what comes from that word? Strategy. And the council, the soldiers, their minds, their wishes. The soldiers decided to kill all the prisoners, because if they did get away, they would be executed. Now immediately they're going to start cutting people's throats. But the head man, he says no. He's not wishing, he doesn't care so much about the life of those men, but he cares about the life of Paul. Paul's kept him alive so far. In order that the prisoners they might kill. Apokatenusen. They might take their life. Then we have the word ekalu besos. Ekalu beo is what it comes from. And having swerved out, that they might escape. And then, in other words, they tried to might get out of the way and run off where they couldn't see them in this wreck. They're trying to, each man is trying to save his own life, and these guys might get away and circumvent the situation and run off. And if they did, they would die. Hode hekon tarkes. Voluminos diasose ton polon ekulusen autos tu bulematos ekelusen te tos dinamenos kalum bon. Apo ripsantes protos epitane gain exione. But the centurion, strong, weak adversative conjunction there, that little day. Ho hekontarches. That's nominative singular masculine definite article and nominative singular masculine centurion. And wishing. Nominative singular masculine present participle middle voice. Wishing for himself from his innermost being to save Paul. He forbids them. Now this word forbid here, it comes from ekoleo, and that means it's punctiliar action, extremely, first aorist, third person singular first aorist, indicative active, and he forbids them, finally, absolutely, don't touch them now. Don't do it. He forbade them the intentions of their minds, bilamatos. And then he commanded both the ones being able to swim, having cast themselves overboard first upon the land to try to get out there, to get out of it, get out of the boat and to save their lives, every one. Now we're in the last verse. Kai tus loipos, whose men epi sonasen, hus de epi tinon, ton apo tu ployon kai hutos ageneto pontos diasostene epi tangain. And the ones remaining in the ship, some of them upon planks, sonisum, planks, and others upon some sort of thing from the ship. Any pieces of the ship they could use for a lifesaver, so to speak. Anything that could keep them buoyant. And in this manner, It came to pass that every one of them was saved upon the land. Every man was saved upon the land, just like the Apostle Paul said. Again, his prophecies come true. Again, the head man, the great centurion, the officer of the ship, so to speak, he's beginning to learn to listen to every word that Paul says. And shouldn't we listen to Paul's words? Because they were inspired of God. This little story here in the book of Acts is a story of the providence of God and the protection of God and the salvation of God and the providence of God. God told Paul months before this, you're going to go to Rome. He didn't tell him you're going to go to Rome and die, but he went to Rome and he preached. That's what he was lived for, wasn't it? Paul lived to preach, and that was it. Our Father, we send this message out, and please use it to glorify your Son and yourself. Father, please forgive me where I failed you. In Jesus'